Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Welcome to Alliance Française of Washington, D.C. Tonight, we will take you on a virtual journey to the southwest of France, to the beautiful Hérault department in the Occitanie region, which is none other than the berceau, as they say in French, or cradle of our executive director, Sarah Diligenti maternal family. So it's a region dear to her heart. And today she will be in conversation with our guest, journalist and writer, Lee Kraut. Thank you, Gary, for joining us today. So Gary served as Secretary General of the Association des Journalistes du Patrimoine, France's Heritage Journalists Association, and remains a member of its board. In that capacity, he organized in October 2021, so very recently, a trip for 7 French-speaking journalists to meet men and women who have devoted themselves to preserving the heritage sites of that little-known part of Hérault department. And so he will be speaking about that area and the unexpected rewards of traveling off the beaten track. And in this conversation with Sarah Diligenti, who herself actually recently went back to that region. Before we start, I would like to introduce Lee Kraut to you and talk a little bit more about his background, which is very interesting. So originally from Trenton, New Jersey, Lee Kraut is the author of 5 travel guides to France and Paris, as well as numerous articles, essays, short stories, and op-ed pieces on travel, culture, and life abroad. He operates the award-winning travel e-magazine France Revisited, which I strongly recommend for your regular dose of France. He organizes Zoom talks just like today with us and interviews, creates Paris audio guides for the Voice Map touring app, and gives lectures on diverse topics concerning travel, culture, and touring in France. And he actually presented early at Alliance Française. Maybe some of you even remember that, as early as 2014, when he was talking about heritage sites and preservation efforts in general in France, and then in 2015 and 2020. Okay, I think at this point I'll stop talking. I'll hand it over first to Sarah. And I'm just hope you will enjoy this evening.
So because Gary will talk a lot about the people, the heroes of Hérault, les héros de l'Hérault, n'est-ce pas? I will mainly talk about the landscape. So some of you who know me know that I have a multicultural background. On my dad's side, it's Italo-Russian, but my mom was the French part of it. And as a real, next slide, please, Natasha. As a real person from the Southwest, she was Occitane, and her family was Occitane through and through. So I wanted to make sure you understood what Occitane meant. It's not just the limit of the red limit that you see here, which is basically, that's the administrative Occitanie. It's much bigger than that because it goes all the way into Italy, as you can see, not far away from Turin. And of course, it doesn't count Perpignan, which is Catalonia, and not Bayonne and Biarritz, which is the Pays Basque, and that's 2 different terroirs. But the Occitania really is the oldest part of France because it was, conquered by the Romans. And we like to say that we brought civilization to the north of France because even though the langue d'oil, the French language took over, from the Franks, the Occitan brought poetry. They brought common law, the law, because it was Roman law and a lot of things like that, including, a few other art and cultures in the Middle Ages. And so when you see that smaller map over there, you can see that yellow dots is actually Hérault. So Occitania is much bigger than what it is. And so when I came back for the first time since 1994 to the region of Hérault, it was the first thing I saw after crossing the Black Mountains, la Montagne Noire, which is always very, very green because it rains a lot. So the first thing I saw when I got off the Montagne Noire and down the slope of Saint-Pont-de-Stomières, and when I turned off the road to go to the direction of the Valley of the Orbe, there was this rainbow, and I decided that was wonderful because the rainbow is on the Mont Carou, which is a very, very famous mountain. The Mont Carou in the Vallée de l'Orbe, and so that was for me a good omen. And that's all. That's the view I had from Saint-Julien-d'Aulargues, from the hamlet called Les Hortes, which is not far away from the little town, medieval city of Aulargues. And Aulargues was just a few more miles further. Is a city called Lamalou-les-Bains, which was basically the reason why I have not been back for so long in the region, because as much as I hiked this region when I was at university in Toulouse for the Faculty of Law, where my mom's family had moved towards Toulouse from the Hérault and Narbonne and Béziers at the time of the early 20th century. We were coming back there at Valras and the other places, you know, when I was growing up. And then as a young woman in my 20s, I used to hike there all the time. So, you know, I knew all the trails and everything. But then my mom got a car accident, and then she was sent to Lamalou-les-Bains in a coma where she stayed and she never recovered. And so for me, it was almost too painful to go back to l'Hérault because of that. But I did. I went back, and the first thing I wanted to do was a hike that I had wanted to do with my son, but at the time he was only 5, and he was only interested in diving into the Éric River, while I was interested into reaching the hamlet. But I had done it before I was a mother. So I went back there, and I thought to myself, okay, so now I'm almost 60. How am I going to make this hike after you know, after all this time? Because it's looks like it's easy at the beginning, but the last 1.5 kilometers is not. And it's a 5.2 kilometer one way. So you have the time here. It says like bon marcheur, marcheur moyen, marcheur occasionnel. But I was very proud of myself because I did it between the middle walker and the occasional walker. So I did a better time than just the occasional walker. And of course, on the way back, I went much quicker. So if you can show the next slide, Natasha, there's some landscape. And so you see, this is a road in the Gorge d'Éric, which was built probably around the 1930s. But nowadays, this road is only used by the park services, because this is in the Parc Naturel du Haut-Languedoc, and by the 3, I'm saying 3 people who live in the hamlet. So the rest of the people are like me, walkers, you know, everybody. And then in the summer, this place, this road is crowded just like the beltway on the traffic, because everybody wants to come here, especially those with young kids, because they want to actually bathe in the Gorge d'Éric. And so this Éric Mountains and the Mont Carou, there is a big legend, and one of it is the fact that the Carou, the mountain Carou, is la femme allongée, the laying woman. And it's all linked with sort of Greek mythology and the Titans that were there, and thus wanting to get rid of the Titans. And so the woman just ended up sort of becoming the rock, and then her head is at the entrance of the Gorge d'Éric, and that's the other rock that you saw before. And as you can see, the head again there. And so there's a lot of waterfalls. On my way back, you saw in the map, you saw this big animal with horns. On my way back, I actually happened onto one. That was kind of cool. I met a lot of hunters looking for wild boars, you know, but with their dogs that were going there. So it was an interesting trip back as well. And then of course you arrive at the little hamlet of Éric and all of the destination, because you can reach that hamlet from other parts of the Carou, from another one hike that I will show you after. I could have reached that hamlet like that. But in fact, people like to go this way because it's kind of easy, at least, unless for the last 1.5 kilometers. And that's the hamlet. And so that is one thing that Gary will explore and maybe will tell us more about, because as you can see, those are stone houses. And what you cannot see very well is that also the roofs are made out of stones. And so I was discussing with one of the people still living there, a young woman, and I said, well, how did it go with the pandemic, you know? And she said, no, it's even more crowded, she said, by hikers than it was during the 80s, because of the pandemic. Now everybody during the lockdown, everybody went hiking, and even people from Béziers and Montpellier, they would come to hike. And so she had seen a lot more hikers than like, let's say in the 80s when I was hiking myself. And I said, well, that must be good for the hamlet, right? And she said, no, it's not, because in fact we're only 3 of us now living there. And I said, but why? And she said, not because there's no work, because obviously there is no work, but she was working from home. And I was looking at where are the cables, where are the internet, you know? But and then she said that the reason why people left the hamlet is because if there is something happening to the house, if a repair needs to be done to the house, because it's patrimoine, and it's been classified, they cannot find the craftsmen to replace or repair the walls, and definitely need to repair the stone roofs. It's absolutely impossible. So people end up leaving, and some of those houses have those 3 permanent inhabitants, but in the summer some of them are gîtes, where you can stay on your own, and you can rent a place for a couple of days. Next slide, Natasha. Thank you. And so you could reach the Hameau d'Éric if you wanted, the place that I just showed you, by doing another hike, which is as strenuous, even actually more strenuous than Hameau d'Éric, especially in the first 2 kilometers, which is going to the summit of Mont Carou, that famous mountain that means so much for the people in Hérault, and especially for the people in La Vallée de l'Orbe, the Orbe Valley. And so, as you can see, I started from Douche, which is, you can see probably up there, and then I went straight through a chestnut forest with a very, very steep slope, 40% steepness slope, all the way to the refuge that you can see here on this picture, and then to the table d'orientation that you will see in a minute. And then after that, most of the people who were ahead of me, they actually went back from the orientation table straight the way they came, but that's not fair. That's not the game, because the game is you have to complete the loop, and you have to go through the bog, because there's an actual bog there, and then come down from the actual summit, which people think it's the orientation table, but it's not. So that's where you start. You cannot see here the steepness of that trail, but it was wonderful, because and actually wonderful, and also a little bit tricky, because it was fall, the leaves were falling, and so all the rocks were covered, and all the little yellow dots that mark the trail were also covered. And so I encountered a couple of people who actually couldn't find their way to the orientation table. And so once you reach a flat area, you go through that kind of landscape, which has a lot of heather and a lot of genêt, those yellow flowers. Oh, Linda, yes. How long did it take me to do that loop? That loop was actually did me probably less than the Hameau d'Éric, because the Hameau d'Éric was 5.2 kilometers one way from the parking. This one was just 8 kilometers, 7 kilometers. So reaching the top, the flat bit where I am here at Mont Carou, took me almost an hour and a half to 3/4. Because of course I stopped to take pictures, and I stopped at the refuge to talk with people. But then after that, it was okay. So the Mont Carou, the table, is wonderful. It's been associated with the Touring Club de France. You can actually see from the Mont Carou, from basically the Pyrenees, where Perpignan is in the Mediterranean Sea, on a very clear day. This one was not so clear. That's why you can see the little white clouds in the background. And on the other side, you can more north to Montagne Noire, towards Toulouse, the Pic de Nord, which is also one that I hiked many years ago, and the Pic Saint-Loup towards the east of Hérault, which I also hiked many years ago. And that is, I think it's the video, and you can see like that the panorama. And it was the most windy day ever. There was La Tramontane. It was actually very, very cold. This was the beginning of November, okay, in 2022. It was not summer. And that's the summit. So the summit of Mont Carou looks really flat and not a peak like you would expect from a mountain, right? And that's up at 1,090 meters. And so I reached that. But what's interesting is that after I left the orientation table, I bumped onto a young couple with a dog, whom I had seen at the refuge, and they were eating the pasta and everything. And I saw they were looking into their hands, and I realized they were looking into obviously a cell phone, right? And I said, is there an issue? And the young man, because they were like in their late 20s, and the young guy goes, well, I don't have any network, so I cannot have access to my app, to find the way. And so I get like, oh, grandma has a solution. And from my pockets, I opened my big paper map that I had with me, which was very, very old, but still valid because obviously the landscape hasn't changed, And I said, and so they said, can we stay with you for the way down? And I said, sure, you can. And I explained to them that this hike that you saw the map of, and can be very tricky because people, when they leave the orientation table, they decide they want, for instance, to go to the Hameau d'Eric, and then they will try to find those little marks, and then they will get lost. And actually, even recently, in the last few years, some people have actually died on that trail because they got lost. And so, of course, all of that, and the Mont Carou is behind there on your left, as you can see. All of that is not far away from my most favorite spot in Hérault, which is none other than Olargues. And those of you who received the newsletter of the Alliance Française know why, because I explain why. But the funniest thing ever, so I posted this picture of Olargues on my Facebook page while I was in France, and telling the story about what happened, and that I will tell you now. And then I get this message from Gary saying, "Oh, are you there? I was there 15 days ago." And that's how basically the idea of an event started. And I said, well, why don't you, I'm in France now, but contact Natasha, my assistant, and she's in charge of culture now. She's the manager of culture. We can probably do something together. And that's how you all have us both today. And so it's very meaningful for me because in 1986, I went to Montpellier. I went on a hiking trip with a friend for 5 days, and we went all the way to Le Gard as well, and the Cévennes, Ganges, Sauve, the Cirque de Navacelle, all of that. And we concluded our trip by the Bruce Springsteen concert in Montpellier in 1986. And the concert finished around 10:30 p.m. It was really long, like 3 hours long. And we had my car, which was a Renault 4, a Renault 4L. And so we had to go back to Toulouse where we lived because, we had our university exam to finish. We had taken the region part and we were expecting the results. And then, of course, by midnight, because we were broke, like students, we didn't have much money. We didn't want to take the highway and pay the heavy tolls. So we took the little roads like we always did, when we went hiking back through Olargues. And then Patrick, that was his name, he says, he stops the car at Olargues and he says, okay, well, I can't drive. And I know you cannot drive. We're too tired. We're going to sleep on the bridge. And so as you can see, can you show the next slide, Natasha? So this bridge has, as you can see, a little bit of a peak here. And so we actually slept right at the top of the peak of the bridge, more than the peak of the mountain. And we did manage to sleep, but we were afraid we were going to roll down one way or the other because of the fact that it was quite a steep bridge. And you can show the next slide. You have another view, last view of the bridge. And so that's the bridge itself. So, and of course it's a Pont du Diable, because in Hérault, we have more than one Pont du Diable. There's another one in Saint-Guilhem-le-Désert, but this one also is called the Devil's Bridge, as always. And then I went back to Minerve, and Minerve means a lot in my family, in my mom's father's family, because of the Cathars. Like, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Albigensis Wars, where this sect, considered a sect amongst Christianity by the proper Roman Catholic Church. And obviously, a lot of you must have heard about how they killed and they burnt everybody at Montségur. But it didn't just end up there, because in Minerve as well, they were burnt. The Cathars were burnt as well in Minerve. And Minerve is really in the heart with Albi. The Tarn is really the heart of Occitania and the heart of the Cathar country, and so is Hérault and Aude. Those three départements in France are really the heart of the Cathar country. And so I went back to Minerve, where now they have erected in 1982, they've erected this monument to pay homage and remembrance of all the martyrs that died at the hand of the Catholic Church in that time. And my grandfather, my mom's father, who was, even though he was practicing Catholic, got into a petition because the Archbishop decided to create a stained glass window in one of the cathedral in Toulouse, Saint-Étienne, to the effigy of Simon de Montfort, who's a saint in the Catholic Church. But Simon de Montfort died in front of Toulouse during the Albigensian Wars, in front of the rampart, because he was the most fanatic person against the Cathars. And when he went to Béziers, he actually said, kill them all, God will recognize his own. And my grandfather couldn't bear that, because he knew he had Cathars in his family way back when. Our genealogical tree went way before the French Revolution. And actually, I will have to ask Mrs. Jean-Jean afterwards about whether we might be cousin, because my mom's maiden name was Madame Jean-Jean. Dad was a Jean-Jean from the Hérault. And so that's all there is left of Minerve from the Count Castle, is this lonely tower there. And you can see here, of course, that it's all limestone and the erosion had created cave. But what's interesting is we are in November here. We are in the middle of November, actually, okay? And the last time I had been there in '94, in the middle of August, just the second week of August, that dry riverbed was full of water, and my son actually swam in there. We're now in 2022 in November, and the riverbed is completely dry and there's no more water. That's I wanted to show you that so you could understand the effect of climate change in that region as well. The most eastern part that I went to this time, I could have gone further, but I didn't have, I only have 15 days. And I had a friend with me who didn't like hiking as much as I did. So I went to Saint-Guilhem-le-Désert, which is one of the most fabulous places. And this platane, Le Roi Platane, has a circumference of 6.7 meters, and it was planted in 1855, and it's still there. And I could remember it from 1994. And so Saint-Guilhem was founded by the first cousin of Charlemagne, none other than Charlemagne, of whom we learned a lot in French school as soon as the elementary school. I showed here a couple of pictures of what's inside the monastery of Saint-Guilhem-le-Désert. You see this reliquary, this gold reliquary is actually holding a piece of the true cross, the Holy Cross that Charlemagne gave to Guillaume. And you can see also those limestone sculptures that have been renovated and cleaned up, etc. So what you want to know is that Guillaume is the Occitan form of Guillaume and definitely of the Frank name Wilhelm, which was a Germanic sounding name, because Charlemagne, after all, is buried in Aachen, which is in Germany. And he obviously fought with Charlemagne against the Saracens in Spain, but he fell in love with the Saracen daughter of the count he had actually slaughtered, and they both love each other. There's a lot of medieval songs of geste sung by the troubadour in Occitanie about both of them. And when she died, he took the habit. So this big warrior Wilhelm became this abbot in this monastery that he had helped created, which was called Gélon, and then he took the name of Saint Guillaume around the 12th century. And so the village is on one of those Saint-Jacques de Compostelle trip. But you may wonder why the statues have no noses. It's because when the Hérault is also famous for la guerre des Camisards, which will happen with the Cévennes later on after Louis XIV revoked the Edit de Nantes. But the Protestant and Catholic wars are also just like the Albigensians and the Catholic Church. The Protestant and Catholic wars are really a big issue still. And in fact, the Protestants, when they were fighting the Catholic, they came to the monastery and the Abbey of Saint-Guilhem-le-Désert, and that they destroyed and they defaced the altar, and they cut the nose and a lot of other things from the statue, because they are obviously iconoclasts. They don't accept the representation of that's what's the cloister, as it's been cleaned and renovated, much nicer than it was in '94. Can we have the other slide? And that's I was really intrigued by the fact that I could see the reflection, but I like photography, so I thought I was gonna just put that one. Then the next one you will see, it's the garden of the cloister. And then the next one, when you leave Saint-Guilhem, you can do another hike. And I was biting my fingers because I had forgotten my walking shoes. And so I did only half the hike all the way to the Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, the little chapel. But you can see what Saint-Guilhem-le-Désert looks from the top of the mountain, and it's really absolutely exquisite. And there is, of course, a Pont du Diable not far away from there. Now, in the Vallée back around Aulargues and the Vallée de l'Orbe, the Orbe Valley, there are a few areas that really worth mentioning, and I'm almost finished the presentation, but I want to talk about that. It's Combes and then La Forêt des Écrivains Combattants. Combes has this church which dates back from the 1780, 9 years before the French Revolution. And if you give me the next slide, Natasha. And for years, so all of these years when I've been hiking in the 1980s, and I told myself, you need to stop and look at this church more, etc., because I was always attracted by the door, and I never done it until this time in November 2022. And I took the picture and I realized that in fact, those were all the symbols of St. Peter. Because when I was driving before, I was thinking, oh, that must be kind of like the Republic and the church together. But no, in fact, those are all the symbols of St. Peter. And then we arrive after Combes, you go up a little bit more, like if you were going to Rosis or Douche to go to take the Montcarou hike. But you arrive at this Forêt des Écrivains Combattants. I would translate that literally as a forest of fighting writers that was created in 1931. Originally, it was a private idea, and they planted 10,000 trees that were offered by somebody who had a pépinière, a tree plantation, to pay homage and respect to the writers who died during World War I. And there are, in total, there are 757 writers who died in the conflicts between World War I and World War II in France. And so there are 560 from World War I and 197 from World War II. So you saw that first monument is very old, and behind there's a lot of stairs, and it's very, very steep, and nobody used that anymore because they've added the road goes all the way to a parking lot now. And so there is a sort of a parcours where you can have where you can go through the trees and you can find those stones with the name of an écrivain combattant. I have taken a few others, but I chose this one because Joseph Vidal de la Blache is related to the current ambassador of France to the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C., and Vidal de la Blache. That's why I took this one in particular. But there are more still, for instance, for famous writers. For instance, a woman I'm sure all of you have heard of is none other than Irene Nemirovsky. She has exactly a stone like that with her name on it. And then there are other famous French writers like Charles Péguy and Alain Fournier, who died, both of them in World War I. And of course, for World War II, we have Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and Robert Desnos. They also have a stele like that. So 66 out of the 757 writers who died as fighting for France between the two wars, we have 66 of them who are in this Forêt des Écrivains Combattants. And that statue you see here is a kind of a representation of La Croix de Guerre. So Saint-Pons-de-Thomières is a very small town, also just at the beginning of the Vallée de l'Orbe. If you turn, you leave the main road, and then you turn and you take on the left the Vallée de l'Orbe, and after you've left Saint-Pons-de-Thomières. And Saint-Pons was a saint which lived in the 3rd century and is very much worshipped. He was very much worshipped in Saint-Pons-de-Thomières, and you can see that's in the church, which was originally built in the 10th century. And the most impressive thing I found, because those were not there when I was back in the 80s, when I was walking, and even in 94, those two signs were put recently by Le Souvenir Français, which takes care to honoring those people who have again fought for France or done something for France during the world wars, and in particular Second World Wars. And so I was so intrigued that I called the mayor of Saint-Pons and I said, what's that? That wasn't there when I was there last time. Who are those two citoyens soviétiques reconnaissants, being thankful to the Ville de Saint-Pons? And in fact, two young Soviet Union soldiers, Paul Markelov and Alexis Strakov, they escaped from a Nazi camp during World War II with some French people that walked back all the way to Saint-Pons, and then they participated in the resistance, the Saint-Ponais, the Maquis Saint-Ponais against the Nazi, and they died during the last battle, August 19 to 22, 1944. And so what I wanted to say, because that's also in Saint-Pons, and I was quite amused when I saw that when I was walking around, because you saw at the first map the Croix d'Occitane when I was talking about the territoire d'Occitanie, but that Occitan cross is a very strong symbol. And even though it's a Catholic cross, a symbol, it means also something about the Qatar for people from Occitania. So it's a very important symbol. But I will leave the floor now to Gary. Thank you.
You can hear everyone in Sarah's telling of this, her enthusiasm for the area and her personal connection with it. And I'm going to talk about more or less the same area. Let me pull up my screen to show, because I'm going to be talking about the people that I met there. So my connection was very different from the Hérault. First, I want to show this bridge that we have in common that brought us together this evening, because we basically met on this bridge, even though it was 2 weeks apart. And it's rare for me to know anyone who's actually been to this area, and it's rare for, first of all, an American, and probably for most French people to go to this this area, which is
why did you choose Western Hérault?
Yeah, I think that Western Hérault chose me rather than I actually chose it. This is the area that, let's see, that's Saint-Guilhem, le désert. And Sarah was talking about this area from here all the way to Ménherbe. And I'm actually going to be talking about this a very small area between Au Largue and sort of up in this area past Bédarieux. So what brought me here was that I'm a member of a journalist association in France called the Association des Journalistes du Patrimoine, that, as Natasha said, we are about 100 journalists that are involved with writing about heritage sites, cultural heritage, all different kinds of sites, and mostly in France. And we are not an association of preservationists. There are certain preservationists in it, and everyone has a different point of view and a different interest in patrimoine or heritage, cultural heritage. Mine is from the point of view of tourism, what an American tourist can be interested in when they're traveling. And we have, in addition to our 100 journalist members, we have associate members who are organizations, individuals, chateau owners, people who are interested in heritage and interested in having contact with the journalists who write about their subject. And last winter, we were contacted by an association called Patrimoine Hérault Tourisme, patrimoine with an S on the end, because they're different kinds of heritage sites that they're interested in that are based in this area. And they contacted us once they wanted to become members, because becoming members gives them contact with the journalists. And I happen to be the one who, I'm a member of the board, so I happen to be the one who opened the email. And since I was the one who opened the email, in a sense, I thought, oh, now I'm stuck with this. I'm the one who has to deal with it, because as Sarah says, like, who really cares about Western Hérault? No one's going to go there, and certainly no American is going to go there. And so I had it, so it was my job to deal with it. So I contacted someone named Daniel Pearson, who's with us this evening, and I'm going to be telling a bit about him. And you know, I asked him about the area, and it, in a sense, it was so off the beaten track. And I don't use the word off the beaten track lightly in France, because I've traveled so far that, you know, everything seems off the beaten track or nothing is. So, but this truly was off the beaten track for me. And so but I was interested in the fact that this was the Patrimoine Hérault Tourisme is a federation of associations. So it's all these different little sites that decide to group together. And it's like, you know, the Dr. Seuss book, Horton Hears a Who, where they all have to get together and like one more is going to bring them over the top. Well, that's what this case was. They needed just one little voice to be heard in Paris, because we are you know, mostly Parisian journalists. And so what fascinated me was that this group of people who have these little, very little, and I'm sure that they don't mind that I use the term little, because compared to the Eiffel Tower or Mont Saint-Michel or Notre Dame, they're tiny, but that they decided to group together to make themselves heard. First of all, they're not even heard in the department in Montpellier and Béziers, and here they are contacting journalists in Paris. So I decided to handle this file, and I decided to organize a Zoom talk with them last spring, early spring. And then they asked if any of the journalists would come to visit the area. And I should say that at some point over the years, I've been writing about France for 30 years, I've sort of made, I am very much an American travel writer, but I also developed about 15, 20 years ago an identity as a French journalist. Because an American travel writer is not necessarily going to this area, but a French journalist would. And to try to discover how the economy works, how these people work together, what is there of interest there, what is there, the restoration work going on. And so I got very interested in it, and I decided to organize this a press trip for 7 journalists to visit the Hérault department. So that's how I got involved in it, thinking all the while, well, I'm going to go on this trip, even though it's not my subject, because still, how can I get Americans interested in this? I have to thank Sarah, because I didn't know how to treat this subject for the readers of France Revisited. I was trying to figure out how do they don't even know, my readers don't even know Montpellier or Béziers. How can I mention the west of the Vallée de l'Or? So thanks to Sarah, I got my in here. I want to sort of begin before presenting some of the people that I met there, because this is very much about the people that I saw in addition to the places. But and I did not do much hiking there, Sarah, though it looks beautiful. And I must say, you went 2 weeks after I did, but you had beautiful sunny sky where I had a lot of gray in October. I want to say this is a very important, extremely important in France, is the notion of an association. In the US, we would just call it a nonprofit association. The law of 1901 is the term that everyone uses, meaning that it's a nonprofit, but you shouldn't think of this as a nonprofit. Like I was looking up figures yesterday, and I saw that in the United States, there are about 1.5 million nonprofit associations. And when we think of nonprofit associations in the US, we often think of big foundation, the Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation or things like that, or hospitals and, things with $1 million CEOs and things like that. But an association in France, the vast majority of associations, there are some big foundations like that. The vast majority are just local groups which really don't have much of a budget at all, which might charge, $50, 50 euros a month, a year to be a member, that have only have a few thousand euros to deal with. And they're really centering around as the Article 1 says, their knowledge or their activity. So it's a common point of interest that brings them together. And as I just mentioned, there are about 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. There are 1.5 million in France. So France, which has 1/6 of the population, has the same number of nonprofits, and they are very, very small associations. And so the association that Patrimoine Hérault Tourisme is a federation of associations. I don't know how many there are now, maybe 12 associations that have grouped together. And one of the co-founders of it is Daniel Pearson, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm going to present 4 association presidents and the heritage site that they're trying to preserve. And one of the co-founders of this is Daniel, and I made a video, and he's speaking French, so you can practice your French, and it has English subtitles.
Bonjour, je suis Daniel Pierson, le propriétaire et l'heureux propriétaire, et j'en ai le privilège, de la Maison du Bailly, ou manoir de Toulouse-Lautrec, dans le village fortifié médiéval de Boussagues, qui est un joyau absolument extraordinaire en termes d'architecture et d'histoire médiévale. Et c'est situé dans une région dont la densité et la variété de patrimoine de tous ordres, civils, religieux, industriels, etc., est gigantesque. Et nous avons le grand plaisir d'essayer de faire partager la passion que nous avons pour notre région, pour participer à son développement et à sa revitalisation quelque part. Nous voyons peu d'Américains et donc nous serions très heureux de vous faire découvrir cette région qui n'est pas immense, mais dans laquelle on peut circuler et voir des paysages aussi fantastiques à toute saison. Et donc c'est un endroit où il fait très bon vivre. Et nous avons, ce qui ne gâte rien, de la viticulture de très haute qualité et qui représente l'avenir de la viticulture française et surtout languedocienne.
Merci Daniel.
So I made sure that Daniel mentioned wine, because I said if you want journalists to come, you have to mention wine, and then if you want American travelers to come, you have to mention wine. So what I'm going to show next, I'm going to turn off the sound. I'm just going to talk as we're showing it. This is a video that Daniel himself made of his little village. So his village is a medieval village called Boussagues. It had, at its height in probably the 14th century, had maybe 1,300 inhabitants, and now has 85. And it is, you know, in France, we always use the term for lovers of old stones. It is a wonderful place for lovers of old stones, and it's fairly well restored. This is Daniel's house there that it was just showing, and it's not, you don't come here, you know, you're not going to find cafes and restaurants here. It's a kind of place you have to sort of stumble upon and you know, and discover and just walk around. But what's wonderful about all these people that I'm going to talk about, and what I can't encourage you enough to be interested in, is that you can actually meet people. Now, we know when you go to major sites, you rarely meet an owner. You're not of a major chateau. It's very rare to meet, even when it's a private place. But in these places, you can meet people, and you not only should, but I think you have to meet people. This has become, meeting people has become, for me, it has become one of the goals of my own travels, and which is why I've made these little videos, because I just think that this is your insight into these places, as beautiful as they are, just to walk around. The insight is to see the people. And I can't fully speak for Daniel or for any of the other people I'm going to introduce you to, but you can actually meet them. If you call in advance, you can tell them I sent you. But when you go to these areas, you can actually meet the owner. They will show you, they will tell you about it. And it is a very different experience to have that kind of contact, human contact, not just with the old stone, but with the old and young people who run them. This is Daniel in front of the, so La Maison du Bailli, the bailiff's house, which belonged to Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, even though he never went there. It was in his inheritance, and Daniel's grandfather purchased it from the heirs to Toulouse-Lautrec, and Daniel is now retired, and he lives there full time. So very devoted to the not just to the house, but to the whole village, and beyond that, the idea was no one's going to come to his village unless he starts to group together with other people. The next person I want to introduce you to is a priest and monk, Frère Marie-Pac Galabru, and who is, well, he will speak for himself. Just as in Daniel's video, he was not sitting in front of his house. He was somewhere else. He was in Bedarieux, and I happened to, because I just came up, I said, here, I'm just going to film you 2 minutes, tell me anything you want to say. It's just point and shoot and one take. And we happen to be in a toy museum, which is why you have these children's books behind it, when Frère Marie-Pac, who is also speaking French in this with my English subtitles, is going to tell us about his passion and his work.
Voilà, je m'appelle Frère Marie-Pac, je suis un enfant du pays, hein. Fils d'agriculteur, j'ai travaillé dans l'apiculture où j'étais un apiculteur, et puis je suis rentré au monastère de l'abbaye de Lérins où j'ai eu la chance d'avoir des responsabilités d'économe et de chef d'entreprise, hein, et à ce jour j'ai quitté Lérins pour m'occuper de ma maman et auparavant de mon papa qui était handicapé, hein. Et je poursuis ma vie de prière auprès d'elle. Et en même temps, je mets mon talent d'entrepreneur et de communicant au service du vivre ensemble, parce que le vivre ensemble dans notre pays est quand même assez menacé. Et j'ai créé l'association Les Compagnons du Sens, qui ont pour objet le respect de la dignité de la personne humaine et aussi tout ce qui peut favoriser le vivre ensemble, notamment à travers des colloques et des conférences que je fais, plus particulièrement au niveau des chefs d'entreprise, pour les aider à prendre soin de leurs collaborateurs. Par ailleurs, je ne pouvais pas me contenter de ça, je suis en train de restaurer le prieuré ancestral de Notre-Dame-de-Nise près de Lunas, entre Montpellier et Millau, prieuré du 8e siècle, où nous avons fini la première tranche et nous allons attaquer allègrement la deuxième tranche. Et le but de cette restauration, c'est de faire du bien aux gens, parce que je n'ai trouvé que des éloges de personnes qui sont passées dans ce lieu, croyants, incroyants, à qui ça a fait beaucoup de bien, d'autant plus que nous avons eu la chance d'avoir des reportages sur la Fontaine des Yeux, la dévotion populaire, où les gens viennent maintenant de toute la France et plus loin encore pour demander le soulagement de leurs yeux. Donc mon ambition, c'est de amener à Nice le plus de monde possible pour faire le plus de bien possible au plus grand nombre et en même temps développer l'économie des Hauts-Cantons. Voilà mon ambition et voilà pourquoi je suis en route et en énergie pour se déployer ce développement économique avec d'autres, bien sûr.
And frère or brother Maripac is he is a dynamic force. He is a co-founder with Daniel of this Federation of Associations. And as let's see, where's the chapel? So, you know, it's a very small place that we're talking about, and off the beaten track of off the beaten track. Along the River Nise. So, you know, you need to group with other people. And what's fascinating in this federation and about the area in general, and it's not, certainly what I'm saying is not specific to Western Hérault, because you can find it throughout France if you know how to look for it and ask the right questions of, you know, who's running the association around here. But that the fact that we have a medieval village, we have a chapel, you're going to see an industrial site, and you're going to see a castle ruin, and there are other associations that have grouped together. So each one has their own little thing. But Frère Maripac is certainly the best known of these people in that he was the economist, as he mentioned, the economist at something called the Abbaye de l'Érins, which is an island, well, it's a group of islands, but the abbey is on one island off the coast of Cannes, that he was there for 25 years. And it is very much thanks to him that it developed as a kind of economic powerhouse in wine. They make a wine that is known worldwide. Has many visitors to it, and he calls himself a business moine, so a business monk, because he acknowledges very clearly that he is a businessman. He's created, and we stayed there, the journalists stayed there in a B&B that he's created in his village near Avesnes, a village which I don't know, has probably a population of 10 or so, and so he's returned after 25 years at this other abbey near Cannes. He's returned back to his home soil, and he's become devoted to, among other things, developing Notre-Dame-de-Nise. He is a fantastic fundraiser because he had contacts earlier. And this is a bit just about 100 yards and below the chapel is this fountain, the Fountain of Eyes, where by, as he says, popular devotion, so, you know, no one will say if it's real or not, but it is customary to take a handkerchief, you dip it in the water by the statue, the fountain is flowing right below the statue, and you rub your eyes, and it can have a miraculous effect, say some, and then you leave your handkerchief hanging. So this combination of, you were really, you can, you can certainly find this in some cities, but you'd have to really, really look for it. But when you're driving out in the country in France, you meet people who are involved with these old traditional sites of traditional, as he says, believers or non-believers. I'm certainly not a believer, but it's just fascinating to see people do it, to see people who believe it. And he is, again, someone you can very easily meet. You don't even need to say you're, yep.
Nice is not far away from Aven, and Aven, in fact, is a famous spa town in France, in the Cevennes, and they have a line of cosmetics products, and they use the thermal, you know, there's a spray for your face as well. So maybe it's all linked to that underground water.
Could be. I mean, they've done tests of this water and they find nothing special about it. That's what he makes a point of saying that. But yeah, speaking of Aven, I'm not really talking about hotels or restaurants here, but one of the nicest hotels in the area, because this is not an area of fancy hotels or gastronomic restaurants, but there is the thermal baths has one of the nicer hotels in the area at Aven. And as I say, Frère Marie Pac himself runs a B&B gîte. There he is inside of the chapel. They've just finished the first phase, and now they're going on to the second phase of fundraising and restoration. And there's the bell tower. Now we're going to go on to Sarah's cousin, maybe, Annick Jean-Jean. Sarah, who was it? Your grandfather, was it?
Yeah, my grandfather, my mom's father was called Joseph Jean-Jean. My grandmother was a Carrère, so which is also a very, and I'll have to talk about the Carrère after, because the next person is in Colombières-sur-Orbe, and somebody I know, famous, with almost the same name as my grandma, is buried there. But Madame Jean-Jean, si vous êtes dans l'assistance, envoyez-moi un email après l'événement, parce qu'on ne sait pas, on peut peut-être être cousine, puisque mon grand-père était un Jean-Jean, et ma mère s'appelait donc Marie Jean-Jean.
Okay, well, let me click so that she can open her eyes and tell us about who she is and what she does.
Bonjour, je suis Annick Jean-Jean, je suis propriétaire d'une ancienne usine de production de chaux avec mon neveu et ma sœur. C'est une propriété dont on a hérité au décès de nos parents. Nos parents avaient acheté cette propriété pour la maison d'habitation, et à leur décès, nous sommes aperçus qu'il fallait faire quelque chose pour ces fameuses dépendances qui finalement se sont avérées avoir une certaine valeur architecturale et historique. Nous avons réussi à faire protéger au titre des monuments historiques cette usine de production de chaux, et nous avons pu entreprendre des travaux de restauration. Ce qui fait que maintenant, cet édifice est en excellent état. Nous avons créé une association qui s'appelle les Amis du Four à Chaux de la Tour-sur-Orbe, et nous avons entrepris de faire visiter et animer ce lieu pour la population locale, et aussi pour faire part en fait de notre contribution finalement au XIXe siècle au développement économique de la région, puisque cette usine, la chaux produite par cette usine, a servi à construire la ligne de chemin de fer de Béziers à Graisse-Sac. Donc elle a fourni la chaux qui a permis de construire les ouvrages d'art de cette ligne.
And there she is on top of the kiln. The people I'm talking about have no pretensions of having a site that's going to draw you, hundreds of miles out of your way to see. And as I say, it's the culmination, it's bringing them all together that is the interest. As I showed in this picture, her parents bought the house, so at the bottom, to have a house. They weren't interested in the ruin. It was just a ruin. They bought the house. And it was seeing that they had industrial heritage sites have become something significant in France. And so they created this, again, an association to develop, and local people, people got interested in it, help provide funding for it. You can obtain funding elsewhere for these projects. The numbers are big if you're the individual who owns it, but the scheme of things, it's not a huge number. And so for those who don't know, and I only learned it from Annick, but this is the lime. Lime means you're going to be making this powder that can be used as to make mortar or plaster. And so it's from stones. The stones have to be heated in these very hot furnaces, and then it's going to be then it's going to be crushed, and you're going to turn it into what's going to be the lime that's going to be used for the mortar. So it's a very simple, I mean, it's a complex architecture, but it's a site where you go to learn something. And again, Annick has no pretensions that this is a place for international tourists, although I'm sure that you'd be fascinated to go there, because really what they want to do is have local school children come and learn about it. So it really is a very local, small association, but certainly it's a stop along the way, because when you're traveling in France, this is what I found over the years, instead of thinking of sites one by one, you have to think of them all together. And because in fact, historically, they're all working together. As Annick said, they're using this to build the train line, and you can see other effects of the train line being built. There were mines around that are involved in it. And so you have the economy is seen through these historic sites, all of them. Again, this is the picture I showed before of an old postcard of it, and Annick, your cousin, Sarah, in front of her site. And the passion and enthusiasm with which these people, and as I say, it's not just this region, you can find this throughout France if you look for it. It's their passion and enthusiasm is what attracts me to it. That is how an area where I would have thought from the beginning, this is way off the beaten track. Of course, it's not off the beaten track for people who live there. And you sort of you should allow yourself to be sucked into their passion and to understand their passion and to let them share with you, which they're very happy to do, their passion for these sites and their reason for getting involved in these sites. This is Lindsay. Lindsay is English. She's speaking in English, and so I've put my subtitles here in French. And Lindsay, we've been going back and forth through the day with these journalists speaking English and French. So there's a bit of a confusion in this. As I say, when I make these videos, it's just start talking. It's only one take. So we sometimes have a bit of a franglais going on here, but you'll certainly understand it because she's speaking in English. And I'm filming from the restored fortress tower that she was involved in. She's the president of the association that was doing it.
I am Lindsay Hancox, and I live in Colombières-sur-Aube. I'm the president of an association which has been formed to safeguard, to save our heritage, the big old buildings, the environment of our village. And it's taken a long time to do this. We started in 2003. No, not 2003, 2008, and we've taken 12 years now, 13 years, to actually get our tower so that you can visit it. Because before it was just a cell, and we have had money from the government, from Europe, from the village, to help us to do this, and it gives me the most amazing satisfaction to see and to let people visit it and say, my goodness, how fabulous it is. You say, when you actually do these things, you think, okay, it's lots of work, and then you've got to try and get money out of people to help us to rebuild it, etc. But it does give you that amazing satisfaction. And although I'm a stranger in this village, I've lived here in France now for 30 years, and I don't think I want to live anywhere else.
I understand her, because if I ever, which I think, go back to France forever, which I may do, maybe in 10 years when I retire from the Alliance Française of Washington, D.C., this is the place I will retire in Western Hérault, and maybe Colombières-sur-Aube, maybe Au Largue, but definitely that valley and that département. Yeah.
So you can hear in Lindsay, you can hear this enthusiasm. Each one of these four sort of represents a different view, a different way about coming to these heritage sites, a different approach to it. But they're all unified in their passion for it, and you can really hear it in Lindsay's voice. And you can think, wow, 13 years and all that passion and involvement, and it's a stone box. That's what is incredible to me, and so it makes my travels in France so fascinating, is the things that people will want to connect to. They connect in all different ways to different things that you would think, well, who's going to spend 13 years of their lives rebuilding a box? But when you really talk to them and understand them and see that it's related to their sense of place and of a dedication to the place, that's what's wonderful to see and to hear, and which makes it, this is the one hike I did, Sarah, is because we had to climb up. They probably would not allow you to do this in the US because it's sort of dangerous climbing up to the hill to view, and it's not the kind of place you climb up and then you find there's a parking lot at the top. We really had to hike up the hill, but it was beautiful, beautiful. Here is the journalist, Frère Maripac over to the side. There's Daniel here, and Anique is here. Lindsay's probably run ahead, and because she's used to doing it. But it was a beautiful hike up. Here we are looking up to this tower, and here we are looking down. So the tower is the old tower. So from the Middle Ages and in the 16th century, when that kind of fortification was no longer necessary, the local lords built the new castle down below. The new castle down below is the property of the woman who is now the mayor. That's where we stayed, Thérèse Salavin, and we stayed there because she has a B&B. And so Sarah, what is your connection with Colombières?
Well, my Jean-Claude Carrière, who was a famous French author and artist, and also scenarist and movie director, and he was very old, and he died a year and a half ago or something like that. And his wife, Nahal Tajadod, who came actually to Alliance Française of Washington, D.C. in 2014, and to speak, she's a famous author, French author as well, and they fell in love. She was much younger than him, and we stayed in touch after that. So I think that the mayor Airbnb is called Les Charmes, if I remember well, or something like that. I
can't remember, but maybe Lindsay maybe can write in the chat. She knows the name of it. So this was our first mayor. We did actually meet on this trip several, maybe four mayors. This was another mayor we met in the town of Villemagne-l'Argentière, and fascinating fellow who's very involved in restorations. Behind him, and I think we'll see it on the next picture, is the 13th century Hôtel La Monnaie, it's called, which was restored and is now the city hall. All these villages that we're talking about, there is one town, Bédarieux, which is a big town. I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 6,000 inhabitants, but otherwise these are towns of 500 to 1,000 here. So doing a restoration like this and finding the funding for it, or obtaining the funding for it, is a major project in a village like that. Here's a video. When you travel the back roads of France, you see a million Gothic or Romanesque churches and chapels. And here's one that I will just show you. This is the same town with journalists who love to take pictures, everything, even the organist. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this is the mayor playing the organ. So we went to visit, and he just got back there and started playing. And again, in a town like this, Sarah, you mentioned you called the mayor of some place and asked a question. You can have contact with these people. You know, they might not drop everything they're doing, but
no, they're very happy if you call like you're from far away and you have a question or something like that. They're so surprised. I mean, especially if the town is very small, they're so surprised. They'll drop everything and then they'll give you a tour.
And especially since you'll be the only American who's been there since me, you know, they will be happy. They'll maybe send me a present if, you know, you go there. No, but I'm not trying to sell. I don't try to sell destinations in France, but I do think that the idea of going way inland off the beaten track, you can have these kinds of experiences of seeing these sites and meeting people and meeting mayors. And if you want insights into France, these are the people to meet, because they know, they understand the economy, the industry, the heritage sites, the political fights. And here we're going to Saint-Gervais-sur-Mar. Do you know Saint-Gervais-sur-Mar?
Yes. Saint-Gervais-sur-Mar is already what we call les Cévennes, because when I went to la Forêt des Écrivains Combattants, I decided to go back to Au Largue, but by going a little bit further towards Saint-Gervais-sur-Mar, and then after that going backwards towards La Malou with another road, rather than just because I didn't want to do the same road twice, you know, and because I only had 10 days there, I just wanted to make sure I could see as many landscape from my youth, you know, as I could. But I didn't have time to stop. But it's really nice, yeah.
I was there on, as you can see, a gray sort of rainy days when I was there, and even then it was beautiful. So I can imagine when the sun's out, how wonderful it might be. And here on the terrace of a restaurant and hotel, as I say, there aren't that many nice hotel that Americans would want to stay at. That is up to American standards, but this is one, the Hortensia, where we had we did not stay there, but we had lunch there, and we had lunch with this is Saint-Germain, which has a little museum of traditional. You find these throughout France, but I think it's always fascinating. And when you have someone explaining to you what they did with chestnuts, or what they did with woodwork, or what they did with their coal, it's always fascinating, you know, to learn it. And this is the mayor that we had lunch with, and I wanted to show him, because isn't this the head of? When you look at him, don't you want to have a drink with him? I mean, isn't he someone you want to have a glass of wine with? In fact, all of them you do. So that's my segue into wine, just to end, since Daniel at the beginning said that you can find some good wines around here. We've been in this area here, so the wines that would be in this area and that are probably the best known in the Hérault are Faugère, Saint-Chinian, and Minervois. So this is the area that we're talking about. So we did meet wine growers, and so you can have wine stops along the way. I do point out that along the coast, I recently learned that Thomas Jefferson, when he made his big tour de France, and we all know that he was a great wine lover and a French wine lover, that he liked the sweet wine of Muscat de Mirval.
Yeah,
so if you ever
very famous, Muscat de Frontignan, as well as the Picpous de Pinet. That's also very, very famous. So that you would find that in any a house in the southwest of France. Right. It's a very rich, the southwest, Hérault, and then the rest of the southwest is very rich for wine.
So I'm going to end with this final picture, speaking of wine, of the group of journalists and the people I've been talking about. We were at Thérèse, the mayor, in Colombière. We're at her house, and she was nice enough, gracious enough to have us over for dinner. And this is the aperitif with, we have Lindsay, I've talked about, and Annick, and Frère Marie-Pac, and Daniel back there, and my journalist buddies. And this is the wine, the guy who made the wine, who's right there. And voila.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. It's so exciting to see all of that, and to see all the people, the landscape for me and the people as well. So, but I really am I found it, you know, sometimes it's like destiny, the fact that I posted that Olag picture on Facebook, and then you went like, oh, I was there like 15 days ago. So because it's a region so dear to my heart that really would be the place where I'd go back in a jiffy if I could. Yeah. So Jennifer is saying that she wants to go there now. Yes, Jennifer, I will give you a couple of addresses as well if you want. You know, it's I mean, for instance, let me give you so I had two friends who came to join me on the 2nd of November, friends that I've known from elementary school in Toulouse. All the way to high school, and then they went to a different university. I did law and political science. They did, you know, biology and medicine. But they had never gone with me to hike this part because my family used to go in April and May and June, used to go to Valras, which is one of the beaches, you know, on the coast. And then in end of August, September, we would go to Narbonne to see some more cousins, and the Narbonne plage and you know, and Gruissan. That's the point. But in the rest of the year, you know, like spring or the fall, it was always in the Vallée de l'Orbe, or for some specific region, because of the family being dispersed and scattered from the Pyrenees to the Carou, you know, we would go ski in the Pyrenees. Sometimes I would actually be a traitor and go ski in Aveyron, in Bramelou, you know, on the other side. And but definitely the hiking part was big. And also because we liked food in the southwest of France, so it was always a question: should we go to Cahors and Le Lot, where we had also some family, for the walnuts and the wine, or should we go to the Vallée de l'Orbe for the chestnuts and the wine?
Right. So you picked your destination depending on what you wanted to drink during that vacation.
Yeah, and the season, because for instance, in the Vallée de l'Orbe. In the 80s, when I was going there, there were a lot of cherry trees which are not there anymore. They're almost all gone. So, but the chestnuts are coming back. So we would choose as well, depending on the season, where we would go. Yeah, but that was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, they often it's interesting because I spoke with the department of Hérault. I mean, my contacts throughout France are with you know, tourist officials in addition to these specific sites. And I said that I was going, actually it was afterwards, I said I went to Vallée de l'Orbe. And they said, well, why would you go there? I mean, these are the tourist officials, and they're saying, why would you go there? And I explained that I was interested in the patrimoine and the heritage sites. And he said, oh, well, we're trying to promote the hiking and nature things there. And it's I often have these, not often, I sometimes have these conversations with the tourist officials, is that they really want to sell something about the region. And they tell me, no, don't do that, because that's not what we're selling this year. And it's always, I think it's crazy that they say it to me, because if a journalist has a subject, let them run with it. But what I don't think that they don't even understand how these sites can go with the hiking. Because you can hike along Nice and stop at the chapel. You can be biking somewhere and stop at Boussac. You can combine a lot. It's not just one or the other.
No, absolutely. I mean, of course, if you, depending on the season during which you hike, personally, I wouldn't go back during the summer. Because, as I said, when I showed you the Gorge d'Éric, I remember 1994, and that was at the time when there was no pandemic, hardly, only the locals were really hiking. And then, of course, the foreigners, and I'm doing foreigners like that in English because there were a lot of Dutch, a lot of Germans, and a lot of British people who were coming. And that was the 80s, you know, before Brexit. And I left, I'm saying the 80s because I left France in 95. Okay, so I haven't gone back to this place until 2022, but my last time was 94. So that was always crowded. So that's why we would, in my family, even growing up in the 70s, we wouldn't go there in the summer because it was always invaded by the Dutch or the Germans or the British. And so we wanted to be with the locals, and that's why we always went off season. So if you go off season, you will have hardly anyone. except if it's vacances de Toussaint or you know, like a long weekend, as we have in France. We have those very, very long weekends. But hiking is becoming popular now, I think, because of the pandemic. Because to be honest, when I used to tell my friends, you know, okay, go skiing, everybody used to ski. You know, we went to the Pyrenees, some of them to the Alps. But hiking, just for walking, they looked at me like I was some kind of alien, you know, right? Because that's what we did. But that's how I learned about the flora and the fauna, because that's why I knew more about the, you know, the botanics and the stones, even the stone formation, because when you hike, you see.
Let me just say, from a practical point of view, since we hadn't talked about it, when I went, took the train, the high-speed train from Paris to Montpellier, and then it's about an hour's drive from Montpellier to the area that we've been talking about. Or you can Saint-Guillaume-de-Désert, you can make sort of a detour, which is about 10 miles out of the way. And you can go also from Béziers, which is maybe a 45-minute drive. It's a little, little less, but Montpellier is the more interesting city than, with all due respect to Béziers, Montpellier is the more interesting city. So if you're visiting the region, you would probably approach by Montpellier. You went to...
I didn't do that at all.
You went from Toulouse.
Yeah, I went from Toulouse, but I drove from Paris to Toulouse because I wanted to stop over in Cahors to see some friends. And then to see I went to the Pyrenees to see some of my maternal cousins and my brother-in-law, who was in the Tarn, outside of Toulouse. And then so I left from the Tarn. So I was already at the gateway, let's say, of really the heart of the Qatar country and Occitania. And I went through the same way I used to take to drive when in the 80s. And so, and in particular, when my mom was in the soins intensifs at La Malou-les-Bains, when she was in a coma, I used to take that road often, and it went through La Salvetat-sur-Agou and Saint-Amand-sur-Soux, etc. And so I will tell you something funny. When I used to go to see my mom was when I was expecting my son, and my uncle, my mom's brother, decided to drive me because he was worried that I was going to be tired, because there was no highway at the time, and those roads were not like they are now. They're really smooth now. And so we were in his deux chevaux, in Citroën deux chevaux, and then on the way back, we arrived at Salvetat-sur-Agou, Saint-Amand-Soux, and then he decides that this person ahead of him in a Mercedes was going too slow. So he decides to overtake it in the middle of the village. And I looked at the panel, and the speed limit was, at the time, was 90, and he was at 110. And so, of course, right at the opposite end of the village, the gendarme whistled and stopped us. And then he told my uncle, he said, "Do you realize that you've actually taken a car inside the village and over the speed limit?" And then my uncle, he looks at me. He was a nurse in a hospital in Toulouse, and he looked at me, and he looks at the gendarme, and he shows me, and he says, "But my niece, she's about to give the baby." She's about to give birth. So the gendarme let us go, and we didn't have to pay a fine. But so when I drove through that city, Saint-Amand-Soux, it all came back. It was a bit like Proust, you know, with the Madeleine, but it all came back in one go. It was so funny.
Yeah.
So you can go through La Montagne Noire, La Saint-Amand-Soux, all that is the black.
Yeah, well, driving from Toulouse, it would probably take 2.5.
Toulouse, Mazamet.
It would probably take 2.5 hours from Toulouse. It depends. I mean, you would go there because you're, no?
No, because that's what I used, 2.5 hours. That's what I was ready to do, 2.5 hours from Toulouse, because that's what I used to do in the 80s. But now from Toulouse to La Malou and then to Largue, for instance, I was done in 1 hour and 15 minutes. I just couldn't believe it, you know. Oh. And I didn't even go far because I stopped at many places to take pictures, to buy some dry ham, you know, from the Montagne Noire. And you know,
there's a message from your cousin Sarah Annick saying merci infiniment pour votre attention, and she's looking forward to seeing us. You and everyone here.
November 2022. I'll be back in November 2022, and hopefully for the entire month and not just 15 days. So I'll come and say hi.
Yeah, I think you should say hi to all the people that I mentioned. It'll be a fascinating return for you who knows the area already so well.
Thank you so much, Gary and Sarah. I think, Gary, you really succeeded in transmitting the passion and enthusiasm of all the people you met and who really had their hearts and still have their hearts in all these sites. And Sarah, thank you for visually walking us through your favorite hikes. I can tell that I almost can say that I've been to Hérault by now with everything I've just learned and noted down. And also the great news is that this conversation was recorded. So if you need any reference for your future trip to Hérault, you can always come back.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to speaking with everyone again, and seeing you on my website, France Revisited, and maybe in Paris. Give me a call, we'll have coffee.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone. It was nice seeing all of you. I see